Hey, I'm Justin. I don't remember much of the 90s. Fraction here for TPS. The 90s was one heck of a decade. Cell phones and the internet just started to come more into fruition. Goldeneye for Nintendo 64 took up all of our days after school, and Nickelodeon was the only channel most of us kids watched. Yep, many of us missed the 90s all right, and I bet some sports teams feel the same way because it marked the last time some of them were relevant. I'm Justin Fraction, and today we dive into 10 teams who haven't been good since the 90s. And a huge shout out to Jorge Perez for suggesting this list. We hope you enjoyed, and if you do, leave your ideas for lists down below. You never know, we might use one and give you a shout out. Number 10, Cincinnati Reds. We've seen some teams like the Kansas City Royals, Pittsburgh Pirates, and Toronto Blue Jays recently, and some playoff droughts that lasted a few decades. That leaves the Reds as one of the few remaining Major League Baseball teams that must truly miss the 90s. The Reds swept the Oakland Athletics to win the World Series in 1990. They reached the NLCS in 1995 before losing to the Atlanta Braves. Finally, they reached the wild card round in 1999. Cincy has reached the playoffs just 3 times in the 21st century and haven't won a single series. Needless to say, the 2000s have not been kind to them. Number 9, Indiana Pacers. Yeah, they've made the playoffs several times throughout the past decade, but besides the 56 wins in 2014, the Pacers haven't been all that relevant. In the 90s, on the other hand, Reggie Miller made that team a powerhouse. They made the postseason every year in the 90s, with the exception of 1997. They also reached the Eastern Conference Finals 4 times. And yeah, they made the NBA Finals in 2000, but take that away and you get our point. The Pacers missed the 90s. Number 8, Buffalo Sabres. The Sabres had the NHL's most dominant goalie of the 90s in Dominik Hasek. With the exception of 1996, Buffalo qualified for the playoffs every year during the decade. They won a total of 7 playoff series and reached the Stanley Cup final in 1999, but lost to the Dallas Stars. It's been mediocrity and frustration ever since. Take away 2 great seasons in 2006 and 2007, and you see why the Sabres made our list. They last made the playoffs in 2011 and haven't won a series since. Number 7, Portland Trail Blazers. Yeah, Damian Lillard has taken them to the playoffs a few times, but that's not saying much in the Western Conference, where only so many teams are above average. Take a look back at the Blazers' history in the 1990s. Cliff Robinson and company made this team a juggernaut. They didn't miss the playoffs once in the decade. They reached the NBA Finals in 1990 and 1992, though they lost both series. Portland posted 4 50-win seasons and they reached the conference finals 4 times. Yep, the 90s were pretty good to them. Since then, meh. Number 6, Detroit Lions. The Lions defined mediocrity and inconsistency. Though Matthew Stafford led them to the playoffs in 2011, 2014, and 2016, his Lions aren't exactly a juggernaut, and at times during the new millennium, they've been downright awful, like during the 2008 season when they went 0-16. Detroit was a way better team in the 90s. They'd reached the NFC Championship game in 1991 while making the playoffs in 93, 94, 95, 97, and 99. That was thanks in large part to Barry Sanders. The Lions were quite great in the 90s and pretty terrible after that. Number 5, Dallas Cowboys. This one is kind of obvious. The Cowboys won 3 Super Bowls in the 90s and made the playoffs 8 of the 10 years during the decade. But Dallas has endured a pair of frustrating decades during the 21st century. They only won a single playoff game in the 2000s, which didn't come until the 2009 wildcard round. Dallas did make the postseason in 2014 and 16, but they've been quite mediocre for the most part. They were the team of the 90s, but have been so inconsistent over the last 2 decades. That's why we put them on this list. Sorry, Cowboys fans. Number 4, Utah Jazz. The Jazz probably missed them some Karl Malone and John Stockton. These 2 legends took Utah to the playoffs every year during the 90s, and yes, they reached the 1997 and 98 NBA Finals, but fell to the Chicago Bulls both times. They made the Western Conference Finals 3 other times as well. Malone took home a pair of league MVPs. That decade was fun for Utah, and it's amazing how it didn't result in a championship. Utah hasn't come close to experiencing the same level of success ever since, and it's made life pretty rough for their fans. Number 3, Jacksonville Jaguars. It's tough to believe, but the Jaguars were once relevant. They were founded in 1995. A year later, Jacksonville reached the AFC Championship game. The Jaguars made the postseason in 97, 98, and 99 as well as reaching the AFC title game again in the latter year. They've been one of the worst teams in football since. Jacksonville has made the playoffs just 3 times in the 21st century, and besides their 2 playoff victories in 2017, they have just 1 more postseason win since the turn of the century. Is relevant a good way of describing them? Number 2, New York Knicks. With a legend in Patrick Ewing and other stars like Allen Houston and John Starks, the Knicks were a terrific franchise in the 90s. They really gave the fans a lot to be excited about. The Knicks didn't miss the playoffs once during this glorious decade. If it weren't for MJ and the Bulls, they could have won multiple championships. They reached the 1994 and 1999 NBA Finals, but lost both of them. New York has been awful ever since. They made the playoffs just 6 times during the century. They have 1 playoff series victory since 2001, and they last made the playoffs in 2013. Hey 90s, the Knicks call, they want you back. And number 1, Buffalo Bills. Poor Buffalo Bills sports fans. We've discussed this many times. The Bills infamously reached 4 straight Super Bowls in the 90s. They lost every single one of them. Talk about a dynasty that should have been. But you see, Buffalo also made the playoffs in 95, 96, 98, and 99. Actually, 99 is the last time this team qualified for the postseason before finally making their return in 2017. The Bills used to be the powerhouse of the AFC, even without Super Bowl championships. Now they're among the most laughed-at franchises in sports. Well, Buffalo, even if you can't find a DeLorean time machine, maybe you'll experience winning again, or maybe not. What other sports teams haven't been good since the 90s? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe as well. We'll see you guys next time.